Good morning, everyone. My name is Doris Rodriguez, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Or we'll give people a moment to get situated. So if you need to get anything, please do so now. We'll start in a couple of minutes. I also want to assure to announce this presentation is available with automatic closed captioning. Additionally, we are providing simultaneous interpretation in Spanish this morning, for which I will now provide instructions for our Spanish Zoom attendees to join. Hoy y siempre brindamos servicios de interpretación simultánea para nuestros eventos, igual en persona o en Zoom. Favor de hacer clic en el globo al fondo de su pantalla donde dice Interpretación o luego haga clic en el idioma que desea escuchar, en este caso español. Si quiere escuchar solo al intérprete, puede también hacer clic en Mute Original Audio, que silenciará el audio original. Muchísimas gracias y de nuevo bienvenidas a Sinergia. Estamos agradecidos en tenerlos aquí. Alrighty. So I'm going to start our broadcast on Facebook. If you can just give me a second. Before we begin, I want to let you know that we are broadcasting today's event live via our Facebook page, and I want to give a warm welcome to those joining us there. A few housekeeping notes. Everyone who registered via Zoom will receive a copy of the presentation slide via follow-up email within the next few days. A survey will be shared in the chat at the end of the presentation. We will have time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, and we encourage questions at any time. However, please remember this is a public forum and we're being broadcasted on Facebook. My name is Doris Rodriguez, and I'm the Autism Initiative Coordinator at Synergia's Metropolitan Parent Center. A few words about Synergia's Autism Initiative. The Autism Initiative project is funded by a grant from the New York City's Council under its Autism Initiative. This project supplements the work of Synergia's Metropolitan Parent Center by bringing an increased awareness to New York City residents, particularly to the communities with large Spanish-speaking populations, about the growing numbers of children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Its strong outreach components target families of children with suspected or known diagnosis of autism who are not receiving appropriate educational, health, and other related services. This initiative will link them to other services and supports that meets the individual needs of the children and their families. I want to thank you all for joining us. We are glad that you chose to be here with us today. Before we get into it, I would like to introduce our presenter today. I want to welcome Gabriela Burgos, Regional Coordinator at Parent to Parent New York City. So glad you can join us today. Before we get into it, I know you all have many questions. And for those that are joining us via Facebook, please write your questions in the comments section. And now I'll hand it over to you, Gabriela. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you, Synergia, for inviting me today. And thank you all for joining me here on the Zoom platform, on the Facebook platform. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Gabriela Burgos. I am the New York City Regional Coordinator, as well as the Spanish-speaking coordinator for the nonprofit organization Parent to Parent of New York State. So a little bit about Parent to Parent. So we are a family support organization. So we do not provide any services, we just provide support. So how do we provide the support? We do it through workshops like the ones that you're attending today, right? We talk about a plethora of topics. So I invite you all, I will put in a few minutes before the presentation is over, I will share with you all my website for Parent to Parent, as well as the calendar link. So I invite you all to visit the calendar to see what workshops we have going on. We also do support groups. Um, I myself run two support groups for parent to parent. I run the Latino Spanish speaking family I'm sorry, the Spanish speaking families support group. We meet once a month. It's free through Zoom. I will also put in the chat before the conversation is over. I will put the link to the Spanish speaking support group. I also run a group for the BIPOC community. So BIPOC means Black, Indigenous, people of color. And that is also free through Zoom. And then we have a plethora of other topics as well. We have groups for children in early intervention. We have groups for children, school age children. We have groups for adults that are transitioning out of school and into the community. We have groups for residential, families that are considered residential. And we have a lot of topics. We have a dad's group as well. That's a group that is growing, and we're really emphasizing for dads to be more involved, in their loved ones and their child's lives, right? So that group is growing really big. So once again, like I said, I'll invite you all to visit the website and the calendar to see what topics we have. So also parent to parent, we also do information referral, which basically means that if you reach out to me and you say, hey, look, Gabriela, I'm looking for an organization that caters to the Spanish speaking community. I'm looking for an organization that can help me with any resources. I'm looking to apply for OPWD services. I'm looking to apply for extracurricular programs, any programs that we have in the city. So I say, hey, look, I know Ms. Doris Rodriguez at Synergia. I know Synergia for many years. They're a group that I recommend a lot. So I help you guys connect to the organizations and programs that you are looking for your loved one. And I think what sets parent to parent apart from other organizations is that in order for us to work here at Parent to Parent, we have to be a caretaker, a loved one, a parent of an individual with a disability. So I myself am a mother of two sons, the youngest being 11 years old. He is diagnosed with autism. He is also diagnosed with a defiance disorder. My son has emotional, mental health, and behavioral health issues. So I use my lived experience living here in New York City. I live in Queens. And I use my experience to say, look, I'm using the programs here. I'm accessing the services here in New York City. So I use my lived experience to say, hey, look, this worked for me. It could probably work for you. So lived experience, I think, is really helpful for us as staff here at Parent to Parent to help you families to really find the right fit for your family member to really be a part of the community. And I think that's the biggest, our main agenda, right? As organizations, is that we want these individuals with either an intellectual or developmental disability to really be a part of the community. So I invite you all. I did put in a few minutes ago, I put my contact information. I know that Ms. Rodriguez is also going to share the slides, and I sent her my brochure in English and Spanish. So I invite you all. Any questions, any concerns, even if you just want to speak to someone, please, I invite you all to reach out to me. So with that said, today we're going to have a conversation about an education records organizer. So if you bear with me 1 second, I will start sharing my slides with you. All right, so hopefully you all can see my slides. So like I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the education records organizer. So the purpose of this binder. So if you have a child with special needs, you can be overwhelmed with paperwork in no time at all. You have accumulated IEPs, evaluations, progress reports, correspondence, notes, journals, samples of work, and many other documents. This presentation will help you organize your documents so that you are organized for your next either CPSC meeting, CSE meeting, or 504 meeting. So I want you to think about your last school meeting. Did the CSE, CPST, or 504 team have a complete copy of your child's file? How can the team make decisions about your child's programs if they don't have all the correct information about your child? So when you organize your child's records, you will have all the information in one place. And we teach families a lot about the importance of organization, especially in regards to educational documentation. Because a lot of times, a lot of families sometimes they have to reopen their IEP throughout the school year. So a lot of the times our children's needs change, right? Either educationally, health wise. So I always encourage families to make sure that organization, right, is really empowering, because it's once you're organized, you feel that you're ready, right? You're ready to advocate for your child or your loved one. And a lot of the times, our child or loved one, we are their voices. A lot of the times, our children or loved one cannot speak up for themselves. So organization really is really empowering for us as the caretaker to say, I'm ready. I'm ready to speak about whatever topic you need to speak with a school team, either a paraprofessional, school teacher, a related service provider. So make sure, right? We're going to learn throughout this conversation how we can organize ourselves so that in order for us to be well prepared for any meetings that we have coming up. So I have a question, and if you want, you can put the answer in the chat. Are you a parent of a child with special needs? And then some people, if you're also a professional who works with families who have a child with special needs, or you can be someone else. I myself am both, right? I am a mom and a professional. And I know I see both sides of, both sides of the coin, like they say. So if you want, you can put, and I would assume that all of us are parents or a caretaker. Let me see if anyone answered in the chat. A parent I saw. Yeah, and sometimes I feel like, even if you're not a professional, you might feel like a professional, right? Because as the years go by, another parent put parent, right? So as the years go by, we learn, right, the ins and outs of, the service systems here in New York State, right? So I think that a lot of the times you guys out there can give a better presentation than when I can, right? With the experiences that we go through every year, it's a learning experience, right? At every stage of the child's life, we learn something new, right? Something newer and newer and newer. So thank you for answering, those who did answer, and I hope that maybe in the Facebook chat as well. Good. I'm glad to hear that. I have a lot of parents here. So we're going to talk about the stress of paperwork, right? We have, look at this. I feel like this is me all, all the time, right? I was guilty in the beginning when, like I said, my son is 11 years old now. But I remember when we started with the early intervention program, right? When I first got my son diagnosed officially at 1.5 years. And I remember, it's the amount of evaluations that we had to do. A bunch of people that came to my home, right? The evaluators. When my service provider I was working with an organization that was helping me. I had a care coordinator. So you had like the whole staff, my care coordinator plus, anyone else in that organization. So I had a bunch of paperwork. And at first, I was very guilty of reading the document, absorbing the information and just putting it in my desk and not remembering where I put it. And as my son got older, right, he transitioned out of early intervention program and into pre-K, right? So I remember when I had to go to school visits. I had to visit with the CPSC team, so it's the Council for Special um, Preschool Education, right? They would ask me, "Oh, can you bring all your documents? Did you bring your documents?" And I remember thinking the first meeting that I went to, when they asked me that question, the beads of sweat started going down my face, because I didn't think of bringing my documents. I assumed that everyone was going to have the documents right in front of them. So the next time that I had a meeting, I remember that, life was busy. I was very busy with my son in the early intervention program, and I'm sorry, in the pre-K program. I was a stay-at-home parent at the moment, and I remember that I did not prepare. I am guilty of being a procrastinator. I kind of leave things last second most of the time. So I remember trying to rush and try to find all these documents, the IEPs, this evaluation, that evaluation, fighting with my husband, putting the blame on him when in reality it was me for not being more organized. Um, and it caused stress, right? It caused me to be so stressed out before an important meeting that by the time I woke up for that meeting, I felt nervous. I felt that, what if I was missing this document? What if I'm missing this evaluation? um so I finally said, you know what, we need to organize ourselves even more. And that's when I started practicing, putting things in a binder, and organizing myself. So, right. So chances are you might have felt overwhelmed like me, right? With all the paperwork, maybe documents that you've received throughout the years, throughout the school year. So once your child starts school, all the way up to graduation, or if they age out of school, I bet you will have a pile of IEPs, evaluations, progress reports, FBAs, which is a functional behavioral assessment, BIPs, which is behavioral intervention plans, etc. Right? A bunch of things that we can receive as parents. So my question or my suggestion to you is just don't throw out any papers, right? I tend to have like a big binder, and every year I put, say, so by the end of 2025, I will have my 2025 binder with all my 2025 documents, and I'll file them, right? Thankfully, I have this space in my home. I know that not everyone does. And now, thankfully, we have technology, right? We can always scan papers, we can scan documents, right? And have it in our computer. But I'm a little bit old school. I like papers. I feel that a paper will never fail me, right? Because the computer might not turn on, right? I might lose all those documents, right, in my computer. So I like to keep papers. I like to file them. Um, so yeah, so you decide as a family, right, as an individual, how you want to keep your documents, either paper-wise or electronically. But make sure that you keep your records. Doesn't matter how old it was, because you might be surprised. I remember last year, I'm in the process of looking for a new school for my son, um, and he needed a new evaluation. I remember that they asked me, "Oh, do you have?" I think it was the IEP, his first IEP from pre-K. For some reason, that person asked me for it, and thankfully I had it. But you'd be surprised, after what, 6 or 7 years, they asked me for a document that was 6 or 7 years old. So, like I said, it might seem trivial, but don't throw any papers, is my suggestion as a special needs mom. Um, Try to keep your papers, try to keep all your documents. So, what will you need to get started? You can bring a binder, right? I'm going to show you my copy. This is my son's education. That's his face. It's a little old, it's a little outdated, but we that's him and things that he likes, right? So I brought it here to work today to show you guys, right? And I have, some of them, right? Some documents that I have, I don't have all of them. Because I didn't want to walk around with it outside, but something like this, right? A binder, something that you can organize your papers, right? Files, dividers, anything that you want to make you feel more empowered and more organized, right? So the binder is something that you will take with you, right, to any of these meetings, either a CPSC meeting, a CSC meeting, or a 504 meeting. So once your binder is complete, you will have all these records in one place, right? So it's easy too. It's easy to travel with, right? You have it all in one place. You can pick it up, right? Put it in your bag and you're ready to go, right? And you don't have to be, like I said earlier, fumbling, rushing. Why is this not here? Why is that not there? So organization is what's going to give you a sense of control, right? I think that's the big message for today. Organization is going to give you that sense of control, that sense of empowerment, right? Because if you're an empowered parent, then you're going to really be able to advocate for your child's needs. So create a binder cover, right? It could be anything that you feel best represents your child. So anything fun, right? You make it as a fun activity, as a fun art activity. So my son, he likes Pez. He likes racing. So we made it nice. We made it like a little decoration, his little face. And it's nice, right? We just make it colorful, something that you can catch. It's eye-catching that you can see, even if it's in a pile in your desk. You can say, oh, that red binder, that's the education records binder. So, just make it personalized to what you'd like. So I'm going to ask another question. Do you have the copies of your child's records? Like I said, some of us are guilty. We didn't think about, oh, well, I need to save, I need to save that IEP from 2025. I'm sorry, 2023, 2024. Maybe not. But if not, then I hope that today, after today's conversation, that you can, right? You consider organizing yourself, creating a binder. So another question is, how do you currently organize and keep your child's records? Like I said, even in the beginning, I was guilty, and I just put it in a desk. I have the family desk, right? Everyone puts, and I was just guilty of just putting it in a drawer, but then I would forget about it, right? I would forget about it or misplace it. Or there was one year where my older son, he thought that it was just, there was a one envelope with one piece of paper, and that piece of paper was the number and contact information from the CSE. So that was when the transition from pre-K to special education school, right? District 75 here in New York City. And my son, my older son, like I said, he thought it was just an envelope that was ready to throw out. And he threw it out, and I had to reach out to that person maybe like a few days later. And I couldn't find her number. I didn't know her name. And like I said, I was really beating myself up for not being more organized, because if my older son would have seen that it's in my binder, most probably he wouldn't have thrown it out. We find a way. I found the solution. I had to call this person and that person to figure out who the heck I was supposed to see on that Thursday. But I figured it out. But once again, it caused me so much stress. It caused me so much stress that I said, okay, no, we really, really need to organize ourselves. So, contact list, right? So now that today, I think all of our children started school today, right? So make sure that today, right? If the teacher or school staff hasn't done it already, try to meet your parent, try to know who your child's school teacher is, right? If you don't know them, and if your child has a paraprofessional, try to meet them, try to know their name, right? Because sometimes also, my other suggestion as a mom, because I think it's in a lot of schools, which is nice, right? We tend to call either the teacher or the school staff by the first names, right? So you have, oh, I have Miss Jane. right? Miss Jane is my school teacher. My son right now, he's in 5th grade. Miss Jane is in, my Miss Jane is my school teacher, and then I have my son as a one-to-one paraprofessional. A few years ago, he had a Mr. Richard, and then he also had, he has his related services. So he has physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech. So the point that I'm getting at is make sure that you ask Miss Jane, the school teacher, hey Miss Jane, what's your last name? Right? If you're speaking to the paraprofessional, oh, Mr. Richard, what's your last name? Because sometimes everyone has the same name. Like if someone else were to say, oh, so who's your son's speech teacher? And I say, oh, Miss Doris. They'd be like, who the hell is that? Right. So that's like I said, it might seem trivial, but ask the staff their last name, right? Who they are, right? Because sometimes you're gonna meet them. If you didn't meet them today, maybe this week, you're gonna meet, hey, look, I'm your son's speech teacher. And then you're gonna meet, oh, I'm your son's OT teacher. And then you're gonna meet, oh, I'm your son's physical education teacher. And then you're gonna forget. I know that I'm really bad at names at first. So make sure you maybe take a pen and paper, right? A little notebook and jot it down, right? As you meet them. Okay, well, I met Ms. Doris Rodriguez, right? She's gonna be my son's paraprofessional. Mr. Richard Burton, he's gonna be my son's paraprofessional. So keep a note of that as well, right? And then in regards to this, the contact list, right? So when they send you a contact list today, right? They're gonna send you an emergency card, right? Fill in the contact form with pencil. Do because names can change, right? And this is for yourself as well. So if you have your emergency contact information, if you want, write it down in pencil and pen, right? So if there's any changes, you can change it right away. Um, and this contact form and this contact list, it should be in the front of your binder, right? Like I mentioned before, put full names of the staff. So the school's principal, right? Make sure you have the full first and last name of the school principal, the vice principal, your child's school teacher, right? If there's a parent coordinator, the school nurse, right? If there's a school psychologist, if your child has any professional is going to be working with your child, make sure that you have all their contact information there, because throughout the school year, we're going to have to reach out to them, right? Sometimes I remember with my son in the beginning, he had very limited speech tendencies. He wasn't able to speak as much. So I used to have a lot of contact with my son's speech teacher, because we would, exchange information, and, she would update me on his progress, right? Give me suggestions to work in, to do things at home. Um, Also, in this contact list, you can also put outside of school, the physician, your child's doctor, right? Their contact information. If you have OPWD, or if you're working with any organizations that provide you care coordination, make sure you have the name of them as well, right? Their contact information. And there's also, like I said, there's a bunch of websites online that can give you these templates for a contact list online. So download it, right? Download it and start filling it out. Basically in this part of the binder, personal contact list is anyone that you feel that is important, right? Is really a vital part of your child's education, medical, anything. Like I said, teacher, physicians, any important person, you would put this on this part of the binder. So, my other question is, what records do you have? It can be more than one, right? So it could be the IEP, it can be a 504 plan, any school evaluations, any independent evaluations, any related services evaluations. So that's OTPG speech. FBAs or BIPs, right? So that's functional behavior assessments, behavior intervention plans, if that's one students that have, behavior difficulties. Um, any correspondence, right? You can also, my other suggestion as a special needs mom in District 75, create a communication notebook, right? um, if they don't do that already in school. I know a lot of schools use apps, right? Apps for communication between the school staff or the school teacher. But make sure that you keep, open communication, right? I think that's the most important. So that you can, exchange information. And like I said, I think the most important for our children that are in school and learning, um, is to follow the same routine that your child does in school. You could do it at home, and the same for home to school. I did a lot of communication with my school staff in regards to my son's behaviors, right? So I would use the communication notebook to say, hey, look, Miss Jane, today my son's name is Ian. Today Ian woke up and, he wasn't doing well emotionally. He was angry. He was upset. If I know the reason why he was upset, I would say, hey, look, he was upset because, he found out that today there was no gym. Things like that really bothered my son. It could be little things that bother him. So I would give them a heads up, right? And say, hey, look, just know that he's having a hard day today. Or if there's anything medical, or anything in regards to homework or schoolwork. So I would say, like I said, try to keep very, very open communication with the school staff, because that's the way that we're going to have our children achieve, right? And reach the goals. I think it's the most important is, the every year we set goals in the IEP. So open communication is going to really help the child reach those goals. So also in section 1 of the binder, like I said, you can have the IEP, which is an individualized education plan. Any amendments and revised plans. You can also have what's called an individualized family service plan. 504 plans, which are plans for behaviors. And keep all copies of meeting notices, right? So any correspondence, like I said, anything that you receive in the mail, any papers you receive in the mail, even if it's email, right? Make sure that you keep a file in your email or in your computer, right? With any correspondence that you receive from anyone, right? So I want to give an example of what the difference between an IEP and a 504 plan, because I've been mentioning IEP and 504 plan. So an IEP is, remember, the annual plan created to outline students' educational goals and special education services needed to reach those goals, right? And a 504 plan is a document outlining accommodations and services so that the child can learn in a classroom setting, right? So, for example, my son has both an IEP and a 504 plan because due to his behavioral difficulties, he needs a lot of behavior intervention. So, so I just wanted to highlight the difference between those two documents. So in section 2, you can add your report cards. It could be the either elementary, middle school, high school. I would say just keep them all. Like I mentioned before, it might be trivial to keep old documents, but just make sure you keep it, even if it's in a file somewhere. Just keep it, right? Because you never know when you have to come back to it. And it's also good, in my suggestion, so that you can compare, right? So let's say like in elementary school right now, if your child is in whatever grade they are. So let's say, for example, they're in second grade, right? And as the school year is progressing, maybe they're having a little bit of difficulty, maybe in math, maybe in reading, right? So I would say, pull back, right? Pull out maybe first grade's report card or kindergarten's report card and just make comparisons, right? Maybe, if the teacher wrote any notes, any comments, right? And see, and see, maybe because sometimes you can pinpoint maybe what the issue is. Maybe it's they need a little bit more time, and more support with homework. Maybe they need a little bit more time or support with in school, right? So that you can also, and if you pinpoint the issue, and then you can speak to the school teacher and say, hey, look, Ian, I can see that there's a discrepancy or some issues with his math, and I saw that last year, the school teacher giving him at least, maybe like 5 or 10 more minutes to finish the math work. He was able to solve, the math problem, so maybe we can, modify. So that's, like I said, it might seem trivial, but it's always nice to go back, right? Go back and compare any documents that you have and say, hey, look, this is what we can work on. Also, you can add in section 2 IEP progress reports. So remember that your child only receives a report card if they're in general education. Okay. So if they are in a self-contained class, they will receive an IEP progress report along with related services progress reports. So some children are in co-taught, mainstream, or inclusion classrooms. And then they will receive a general education report card from their teacher and an IEP progress report from the special education teacher. So it just depends on, what class setting your child is in, if they're in general education and they just get related services, or if they're in District 75, which is special education. So it just depends, right? Just depends on what setting your child in is, and that's how they get the progress reports or report cards. So in section 3, you can include homework, classroom work, tests, right? It can be samples of homework assignments, samples of classwork, samples of class tests. So you don't need every scrap of writing or drawing that your child has produced, but a few samples are very helpful throughout the year. You can use them to show progress. So like I mentioned before, right? Use those, right? Go back to, let's say, last year's work, and compare. Because sometimes, like I said, you can pinpoint if your child is having some difficulties in school. You can always compare and say, hey, look, 2 years ago, with the teacher, we modified his classwork a little bit and he was able to achieve. So it's a nice way to compare. And if you guys have any questions, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go back. I'm sorry. If you have any questions, any comments, let me see if there's anything in the chat, or I'm not sure if Miss Rodriguez has anything from Facebook.
Let me check, Gabriela. Give me 1 second. So we don't have any questions right now. However, I do want to circle back to one of the registration questions. Somebody asked, when requesting a taxi transportation with a nurse due to seizures, what steps should I take to get this approved? No one is following up on the limited time, or complaints on file at OPT.
So one of the suggestions I would say is, the first thing is to really communicate with the parent coordinator, right? Your child's school's parent coordinator, right? Because they can be the direct contact with you to reach out to the OTP, right? So that's the offices of transportation, right? OTP is a transportation agency. And I know it's very difficult, right? Because a lot of the times these bus companies, they kind of are separate from the school, right? And I know a lot of the times, and this is like a common complaint that I have from a lot of families that receive transportation through the school. The bus company is not listening, the transportation company is not listening, the school is trying to reach out to them, they're not listening. So what I tell families all the time, right? Make sure that any accommodations that you're requesting, be it medically, be it educationally, transportation, whatever that may be, any accommodations that you need, make sure that you have that stated and written in your IEP. Because we have to remember that an IEP is a legally mandated documentation, right? So it's whatever is in that IEP, the school is legally mandated to sorry, I had a brain freeze. The school is legally mandated to do what the IEP is saying, right? So a lot of families reach out to me and they say, oh, Miss Burgos, my son is supposed to be picked up, from the bus company at this time, or my child is medically fragile and they're supposed to, receive a medication at a certain time. They need a medical paraprofessional because of their health needs. So now my number one question I ask the family is, do you have that written in the IEP? A lot of the times they say no. So that is the reason why the school is not legally mandated. They have no obligation. If it's not in the IEP, they have no legal obligation to to give you what you're asking for, right? So make sure if something changes throughout the school year, you can always request with the parent coordinator, with the school psychologist, with the school principal, ask them to reopen the IEP, right? So that you can revise it and say, hey, look, we need to add something in regards to, my child being medically fragile. And then, like I said, with the transportation, I would say the number one person or the first person to reach out to, either the school principal or the parent coordinator. I think the parent coordinator is the main person that can really help you. Um, and always, if you're having any other concerns or if you still feel that they're not listening to you, I know that we've been sharing my contact information. Reach out to me because I do have contacts. I do have information on, if you're having issues with busing or transportation. I do have information and who you can contact, right? But remember that it's a big headache. Transportation is such a big headache for a lot of families. But make sure that that you speak up, right? Don't be afraid to speak up. You're not an annoying parent, because sometimes parents tell me, oh, I don't really want to speak up too much because then I don't want to seem like, like I'm pushy. Some families feel like schools are retaliating against them because they're speaking up so much. But that's my child, that's your child, right? And you want the best for them. And you want to make their school experience as easy as possible, because then, sometimes those little road bumps can really, for a child with special needs, it can really, scramble them above, scramble them in regards to, it can maybe disrupt their routine. A lot of our children thrive through routines and schedules, right? So just like I said, make sure that you have everything mandated in your IEP, make sure that you're speaking up, right? And like I said, I think the parent coordinator is the number one and the best person to reach out to, especially in regards to transportation issues.
Thank you, Gabriela. So, let's see, there are two more questions. Um, do you make recommendations concerning available resources?
Uh, it's the question would be, is it like in regards to school or in regards to anything outside of school? And then what kind of recommendations are you asking about? Like, is it like education recommendations, medical recommendations?
If the person can clarify that question,
Yeah,
that
if
would
you
be
can.
great.
Yeah, I would like to maybe a little bit more context behind that question.
Gabriela, I'm gonna stop the recording before continuing on to the next question. But I wanna also announce that I did put the survey on the chat for those that are present. If you could take some time to complete it. Um, so let me stop the recording. Thank you, guys.